Brilliant. Thanks so much, Callum. Wow, what a great audience. Fantastic to see first audience of the day, absolutely full house. We can't ask for more than that. It's amazing to see how much there is around esports and gaming at BET. It feels like it grows every year. I'm not sure whether it's just because the installations are getting bigger or the amount of activity, but probably both. And we've got a fantastic panel to kick things off today to talk about game-based learning and gamification, which I think speaks to the range of ways in which gaming has become part of our education. But of course, when we think back to how we learn, how we developed, gaming, playing games, joyful experiences are so central to that learning pursuit. And it's, I think, for me, really critical when we talk so much about digital gaming to remember that connection to a real origin of both our cognitive and social development. And esports is a fantastic way into that because it brings people together around a common passion, but also to produce things that are really quite complicated, like complicated tournaments, streaming events. These are all fantastic skills for people to work together on to build their own skills and a whole range of sets of knowledges. But what's also exciting about the world of gaming and esports is how much there is around the stakeholders. The range of people that are now part of this learning space has been transformed over the last decade or so. And our panel today speaks to that in volumes. And I want to kick off by speaking to Una about the BBC context, because BBC is a fantastic example of how so much of that interactive learning has been part of its own journey. Tell us a little bit about your role and how gaming fits into it.
Hi, so I'm Una. I exec produce Bite Size Secondary. Hopefully for a lot of people here, Bite Size will be a household name in terms of we help many millions of young people with their homework and their revision and getting through their GCSEs. So my team commissions and produces all of the content that fits together to do that. So whether that's videos, animation, writing, quizzes, and games are really an integral part of that suite of content. We don't see it as a kind of an add-on or a separate thing. So the way that I see games commissioning is as something that can offer all of the ways that you learn through games generally, so problem solving, social learning, all of those things, but then a way of modelling the pedagogy for the specific subject. So we have an award-winning history game which is about exploring historical sources. We have a science game which is about exploring the variables of doing an experiment for yourself. What you see behind us, this is a massive sneak preview of some work in progress. So this isn't live yet. This is a Roblox experience, which is BBC Bite Size's first Roblox experience, which we're going to launch this summer. And it's a geography game for Key Stage 3 and middle school curriculum at K-12. And hopefully this is a case in point of why I would advocate for game-based learning. So what this does is is a decision-making exercise in geography that allows you to make decisions that allow you to play with the interdependence between human and physical geography, see the outcome of your actions, and then tangibly play them out in a world.
That's really fascinating. I think especially because it's clear that games like that or initiatives like this aren't subject specific. You can have a whole range of subjects brought in. I'm curious who's in the audience actually. How many hands up if you work within a school or a college as a teacher? Okay, so we've got quite a lot of teachers in the room. Hands up if you work outside of IT within that context. So whether you're teaching computer science or whether you're in the IT department, hands up if you're outside of that subject area. Okay, quite a few people here. So I think that aspect of making sure that people see the breadth of interests around this is really a key part of what the opportunity is. So do you feel like then Roblox, why was Roblox the choice in this case?
Oh, that's interesting. So Roblox is where a huge number of young people are. So this is their natural environment. And it's really important to me that we don't just see learning as being in the classroom, that it is more holistic. And it also, to be honest, it gives us that tangible element, because the metaverse allows us to do social learning. That's something that I've been interested in from long before games. We've done it in other ways, so discussing with others, making decisions together, but it also that there's something lovely and tangible about it, that it allows you to take ownership of your world and to really see and feel things growing around you, which I love. But yeah, it's also where 11 to 14-year-olds are, and we want to meet them with learning where they are.
Yeah. How many hands up if you've played Roblox at all? Okay, we've got a bit of work to do here to get people into this space. I think that's a really critical part, taking learning to where the children are as a critical part of that process. And I think what we understand by that is the opportunity it has to reach students at different points in their lives as well. So Estelle, tell us a bit about Yuki and the digital schoolhouse and how it's reaching into the lives of young people to give them gaming experiences.
Yeah, so Yuki, if you don't know, is the UK trade body for the video games industry. As part of their education team, they have several initiatives, but one of them is Digital Schoolhouse. And we have a network of schools across the country. We actually have a few internationally as well. Oliver is one of our teachers, actually. So we run free workshops in local areas and generally primary aged. And we also provide lots of workshop resources online that people can download and use for free. The majority of which are based around various different video games to really open up students' eyes to different ways that they can interact with technology, learn about computing, but also cross-curricular as well. So just like you were saying previously, it's not just about computing. We have lots of workshops that incorporate art and geography and history and really meet the students where they are and help them to discover elements of their curriculum in perhaps a different way that they wouldn't necessarily get to encounter in their classroom normally.
And what's your way into working with schools? And do you have sort of direct relationships that you just work and manage, or how do people discover you and work with you?
So our schools will work with their local school network anyway. So the majority of our schools are secondary or further education. So they'll have connections for transition between like year 6 into year 7. So they'll contact those schools and say, would you like us to come and deliver a free workshop for your school? We have elements that way, and that's the vast majority of our workshops are run that way. But you can also request workshops via our website as well. So if you go on there, we'll put you in contact with your local digital schoolhouse teacher, and they will get in contact and arrange something with you to come and deliver a workshop for you.
And do you have a sense of where that fits into their timetable? Is it within a certain subject area where this takes place, or is it quite organic?
Yeah, it's quite varied. So some schools will say, will you come and run something as part of our computing curriculum? Other schools will say, well, we're doing this topic on Tudors. Could you come and do a workshop that will fit somewhere in that? And we've got a workshop based around mazes. So that's quite a nice one that you can develop into a workshop for Tudors. And then you have Henry VIII walking around a Tudor maze and things like that. So it just depends. It's very open and fluid in terms of what the school's wanting and where they want it to fit within their own curriculum.
And what sort of thing do the teachers tell you about it after they've had the experience of you guys coming in? What do they say about how it's affected their learning or how it's influenced their own curriculum?
So one of the big things that we do as part of Digital Schoolhouse is that all our resources are then given to the teacher. So it's very much an opportunity for CPD for the teacher as well as a fun day for the students. So it's about opening the teacher's eyes as well to things that they can do in their own classroom. So part of what we do is to look at ways that we can deliver parts of the computing curriculum with very little technology. So we do a lot of unplugged activities without using a computer at all. We do dancing with Just Dance to teach algorithms, for example. And yes, I did say Just Dance, but we wouldn't necessarily be using the game. We'd use the pictos, which are the little stick-type characters, and we use them to illustrate how you can develop an algorithm. Obviously, for very young students, that would be just beginning to introduce them to the concept of algorithms and how you would plan an algorithm.
It's really interesting to hear about dance. One of my highlights last year was going to see the film Grand Theft Hamlet. Did anyone see this film? So it's a kind of behind the scenes of the making of the production of a performance of Hamlet within Grand Theft Auto, and it's a really hilarious documentary. I went to it with my son, who's 14 years old, and I think it's a great example of how you can fuse these worlds together around subject areas. So they talk about how they sort of put this together, how they got people involved, but essentially repurposing Grand Theft Auto for something that's very theatrical and really quite amusing. And so I think that opportunity to bring subjects together across gaming is a really significant aspect of this. And Oliver, you've done so much with the world of esports over the last few years at Barnsley College. Tell us a bit more about what the impact that's had, both on the pupils that have been involved, the students involved, but also the staff community as well. Because I think one of the real challenges with progressing that really organised gaming experience within a college or school setting is getting that leadership around it. What's been the way to pitch esports to get that buy-in?
Yeah, so the way that we kind of went into it and did it is we were one of the first colleges in the country to actually start and run esports, and the growth we've kind of experienced has been huge over the last years. The way that we've done it is kind of by attracting students who might typically be disengaged in education, utilising something that they love and a real passion that they actually have. And what we find is alongside that is the skills that students actually develop is on a different level. So you've got students who typically they might be a little bit introverted, struggle with communication, struggle with simple problem solving tasks because have not necessarily been exposed to that. But by working typically to the Pearson specification and kind of pushing the barriers a little bit further, their skills naturally develop further. So one of the recent things we've done is for eSport events module for the teachers who teach it out there. We've partnered with Cineworld, so we're delivering events where students are actually planning and contacting primary schools and getting engaged in terms of having to work with key stakeholders and have different job roles. We've got people working on production, people organising events, and essentially by utilising this, that's what's really allowed them to see that skill development. And that's kind of where the growth's come from, but that's how our leadership team support us. So they are really supportive, they really promote the esports provision within Barnsley College as well, but that's because they can physically see the benefit of that. So there's always an example that I'll go to, and we had a student who started on level 2, and I remember the first day where we actually interviewed him, and he couldn't say a word, he couldn't look up, he couldn't look me in the eye, and his mum essentially did his interview for him, because this is a kid who naturally disagreed with education, didn't have a good time at secondary school, and from that he came quite reserved and had his barriers up. But throughout the programme, so that student started on level 2 and they're actually on his level 5 programme currently, and that student's worked with primary schools, delivering events, taking a bit of a lead with that, and as Estelle mentioned, I work with Digital Schoolhouse as well, so I go in local primary schools delivering, and that student's actually had the confidence to come and deliver sessions and be able to do so. And this is typically a student who wouldn't have necessarily been able to progress, and if he got any job at all, it'd have been such a success, but now he's got better aspirations, higher aspirations through utilising the power of esports to allow for that development. And obviously seeing this and having these sorts of case studies where you can actually measure the impact is reason why we're supported so much by the senior leadership team.
Could I jump in on that?
Yeah, go for it.
You've just reminded me at a slight tangent, but hopefully an interesting one about game design, is that something that I love about making games for young people to learn through is that it's an arena in which you can often allow them to experience mastery. And often, like, young people aren't confident in their learning, they experience failure, they experience frustration. And one of the lovely things in game design, so for example in the Roblox experience that we're designing now, is that often you will have a cohort of young people who are going to be more masters or mistresses on the platform than perhaps teachers or parents will be. So the teacher may be the expert on tectonic hazards, on volcanoes, on whatever the subject matter is, but the young person who's playing the obby, which is an obstacle course to anybody my age, might be a master in using that platform. And so I just love that. I love that it gives that experience for that to experience success.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, the other side of mastery in video games, and the thing that I think makes them so unique and special in education, is that the way that you play a video game is you're expected to fail and try again and experiment and see what works and what doesn't work. And for so many children, they're terrified of getting things wrong in the classroom, that, I got this wrong in maths, I'm really embarrassed in front of my friends. But actually, if they're doing the same kind of skill development in a video game, they're actually quite happy to make mistakes and experiment and see how they are going to get that answer right. And it's just, that's something that's so powerful when you can actually harness that for education.
I'm going to be controversial here and say, everybody knows that works with me that I'm not a fan of leaderboards for that reason. So I'm kind of here to say today, I'm team game-based learning rather than team gamification. And there is loads of value to leaderboards. I know that there is, but I think, everything that you were just saying about experiencing, trying again, experiencing the fun of doing something unintended and what might be the consequence of that is so much more powerful than just the motivation of, I've got to move up one place.
Yeah, and I think the problem-solving aspect of it cuts across esports and gaming, and for me, that's certainly one of the really exciting aspects of it. I think also often aspects of gaming are underestimated. I have started before the Christmas started playing the new Indiana Jones game, which of course is a big title that's been released recently, and there is so much reading involved in that game, and there's so much you have to step through. But I think that aspect of it is really a critical part of the developmental opportunity. But I think also just see who's in the room again. So hands up. I used to ask people if you've heard of esports, but most people have kind of heard about esports. But hands up if you have been to an esports event. So a few people. So I think Callum later may tell you when the next British esports event is taking place. But it's really something to witness, to really understand. Whether it's a schools event or a big national event, it's a phenomenon to witness and be part of. And it gives you that sense of the purpose, the empowerment, the agency that the participants and indeed the spectators often receive. We talk about esports as being a kind of active media where we are sort of constantly making decisions. And I think the sophistication of gaming technology has become so complex, rich, exciting. Things like where you start a new game and you teach it your personality, and when your character then is defined by your personality, provides really insights into who you are as a person. So it can be a really reflexive process. I want to come back to you, with talking about the media in particular, because we obviously the BBC has been involved with so much mediated experiences for children. Would you say then that the sort of Roblox initiative is a sort of example of how it's trying to embed more agency-based active learning within its portfolio? Is it that does that work more effectively than just video content? Tell us a bit more about that wider context.
So yes, the Roblox experience does that, although I should say a big plug for the massive suite of games that we already do have on the BBC Bite Size website, which are, free to access, free at the point of use, designed incredibly accessibly, and they're for primary and secondary. So we've been doing that for quite some time. And I would say, we try to, I don't want to talk about Bloom's taxonomy, but we let's not do that this early in the morning. But we try to offer experiences across a whole range. So we have quizzes, and we know that, spaced repetition is really important for remembering material. So we have those. We have short models. So we have, little things that are embedded in a science page where you can manipulate the variables and see what happens if you, leave the leaf in the dark with no water and, or overwater it and everything in between. And then we have games where you can play and become more involved. And I think what the games give for me, certainly at secondary, because I do go for game-based learning rather than gamification, is that ability to develop the skills as well as the knowledge around the subject. So whether it is exploring a source in history and understanding why one source is more reliable than another and how you can use it to answer a question. At secondary, certainly that's more powerful than just being able to remember, who was the King of England in a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And Roblox then is a step on from that, in that you can interact with other people and it gives us a more immersive environment.
Interesting. And so Estelle, with Digital Schoolhouse, the portfolio of games that you work with, are they quite broad? Are they constantly changing? What sort of things do you typically work with?
So there's a real wide range with a bit of everything in between. So I've already talked about Just Dance. Who is familiar with Assassin's Creed? Okay, you might be surprised that we have looked at using Assassin's Creed. If you are not aware, they've also developed something called the Discovery Tour, which is a version of Assassin's Creed. It's not all of the games, but the most recent ones, where it strips out all of the content that makes it a PEGI 18 to make it into an exploratory game where you can literally go and investigate the environment. So you get to go and see Rome and Britain, for example. You can go and visit the Egyptians, learn about mummification, lots of things that cross over with the Key Stage 3 scheme of work, but with none of the content that would make it inappropriate to use in the classroom. So that's sort of one end of the spectrum, which is kind of thing that would be very difficult to develop in an education sort of tech-based company, because the amount of money that Ubisoft spent on Assassin's Creed is just amazing. When you consider that Notre Dame was rebuilt based on some of their models because it was so close to the original, it's just amazing. But be able to open that up and use that in a classroom environment is amazing. But we also go to things in between. Super Mario Maker 2, we do a workshop based around teaching students how to use binary. And they make a level that you have to solve some simple binary puzzles to get to the end of the level. But yeah, all sorts of different things. We are here if you do want to come and explore some of our workshops. I won't talk too much about it. We're SP60 if you want to come and and find out more. Do come along.
Yeah. I think certainly, in fact, both BBC and digital schools are more or less sort of directly that way. I think if you head out the other side of the hall, I think one of the things that strikes me is that if you are sitting here hearing about this, you think, well, we don't have the IT infrastructure to put on Assassin's Creed in our computer rooms. How do people get engaged if they don't have the infrastructure for working with you guys?
So, as I said earlier, a lot of our workshops don't actually use any technology. We have different ways of engaging and using the games, but there's lots of ways that you can develop even esports tournaments without needing a lot of technology. So the Digital Schoolhouse tournament, we're actually running our tournament at the moment, but if you wanted to sign up for next year, we actually offer free equipment that you can borrow for the duration of the tournament.
Does anyone need any free equipment? That's up in the
So again, if you're interested, come and chat to us. So that's one way around it. There's a big development in cloud-based gaming as well, which really makes it much more accessible to schools. So we've got a workshop based around Sea of Thieves, and that uses the cloud-based version of the game. So there's nothing to download. It runs on my thin client type computers, which are pretty rubbish, to be honest. But as long as you've got a fairly decent internet connection, it works. So, and I think with more development of that kind of technology, it's just going to bring it more and more to life and more accessible to the schools.
That's fantastic. And Oliver, I want to come back to you because you've gone on a really long journey of getting institutional support for investing into esports facilities. Tell us a bit about how schools or colleges get that leadership buy-in to what you're doing, and tell us a bit about what your facilities are. What have you got?
Yeah, so in terms of facilities, we're actually quite lucky at Barnsley due to, like I said earlier, SLT really invested. So with us, we've actually got 3 state-of-the-art esports facilities, and we're also in the process right now of creating a own F1 room for when we compete in Williams Racing League as well. So we're quite fortunate in that position, but the way that we've kind of built up to that isn't just through what we do on a day-to-day basis, like I mentioned earlier with skill development. It's also through working with sponsors, working with different companies. I mean, there's numerous companies here today, but there's a couple we work with in particular. So SHI, they support us with sponsoring a room, and also eBuyer as well. They're supporting us with F1 rigs. So through working with these partnerships, as a teacher, as a course leader, is a little bit more work for yourself, but the end result is having those facilities what really enhances student experience. So that's the main thing. That's probably why we're all here. It's all about enhancing experience, whether that's from a business perspective or a teaching perspective. So definitely look to get those sorts of buy-in so you can work with that as well. And I think that naturally just creates collaboration, and it's also great for student-led projects. So as I mentioned with the F1 rigs that we're working on, it's actually our students what's been talking with eBuyer, for example, and they've been the one that's setting up the rigs and running that project themselves. So it kind of takes a little bit of pressure off us, and also gives them real key experience working with stakeholders. So when they progress into their careers in the future, they've got that sort of experience already. What they can talk about it for university applications or whether they're going for jobs, etc. But it's just having that collaborative overall approach to allow it to be really successful.
So are the students running the facility, or do you have more IT staff that help with the management of it? What's been the sort of locus for source staffing it really?
So it's predominantly esports staff what run it. Obviously we need to call IT a lot and help us out. But yeah, so essentially we're responsible for the equipment, but we have students who lead student-led projects. So we've got one, for example, called Jamie, and he probably messaged half the people sat down in this room on LinkedIn to get some sponsorship, because that's kind of what he wants to run with. He wants to do something similar in the future. So he's literally took the full lead on that to allow that to be successful, and we give him the responsibility and the trust to do so, because it wouldn't necessarily be a huge benefit to me, but for someone just starting out in their career, it can support them so much.
So we've only got a minute or so left now, so I want a bit of a summary. So what I've heard so far is both the expansion of both learning experiences, new kinds of learning experiences for learners who may not be fully serviced by existing provision. In fact, I think that's a really interesting part of it. And I think that's becoming increasingly, with personalized gaming experiences, a key part of making sure that each learner has their own unique journey through the game as well, which is a fascinating aspect of it. The agency and empowerment that these games is providing is really compelling, I think. but also the way in which the school is mobilizing around new forms of provision through these workshops you've been delivering as well is really exciting. For me, one final thought for you is that I think that when I always think about the history of sort of gaming and esports, people sort of ask what stage we're at. And I sort of use the analogy to cinema. I feel like we're still in the silent film era. As much as you see here and as much as has happened, there's still a huge amount of development taking place. A quick example is the Olympic Games, which is going to have Olympic esports games in the next couple of years. So an organization that historically hasn't been very close to this is starting to see the value of it. Now, I think that's really important when you look at the lifestyle and the broader well-being of young people. Making these connections across disciplines, across the curriculum, across lifestyle is a big part of the opportunity here. And as you can see from the panel we've had today, there's a lot of passion, creativity, agency and empowerment. I think it's a great place to explore these possibilities, not least because it creates new conversations across your teams and your schools, but also across your learners. So we are out of time, unfortunately, but do stick around for more talks across the sessions here in the esports space. Please also stick around if you want to speak to the speakers. They'll be around for a little while longer, but please join me in thanking Oliver, Una, and Estelle. Thanks, everyone.